Hey, friends, it is Jason. I'm doing another impromptu Substack Live because I was just actually thinking about something. So, one of the most common experiences I think a grieving person has, or at least one I've experienced myself, but I've also heard over and over again, is that people people just don't show up. You know, they very quickly stop mentioning the person that you lost. They don't check in on you, etc. And I think one of the reasons that people do that, they find themselves, um, like where they're not showing up maybe for their friend the way their grieving friend had hoped. I think part of the reason is that we ask ourselves the wrong kind of questions. So I do a lot of work with clients and stuff, and I always base it on the idea of appreciative inquiry. Which, if you've never heard of it, I mean, for me personally, it's been one of the most life changing things that I've ever learned because it's not just a process for taking like a team or any group of people or company through change. It's also just a way of looking at the world. And one of the ways or one of the things that human beings just naturally do is we focus on everything that we don't want, right? So, and then we try to avoid the things that we don't want. And the problem with doing that is that when we're focusing on what we don't want, we're not actually spending time thinking about what it is we do want, because what we do want is not necessarily the opposite of what we don't want. And I'll explain this in a minute. So if you think about a grieving person, to like so somebody who's lost someone or something dear to them, the people who love them want to check in on them. Like, they want to know how they're doing. Like, but the problem is they're focused on what they don't want. So the kinds of questions they ask themselves are, how do I not make it like how do I not make it so it's not awkward? Or how do I make things like how do I not make things worse for the other person than they already are? The problem when you ask yourself those types of questions, and this applies to any situation in your life, not just grief, but I'm talking about grief here, is the problem is when you ask yourself a question like, how do I not make things worse than they already are for the other person? Is it you ultimately come up with a list of things not to do, right? Well, I'm not going to mention it. You know, like whatever the list is, you come up with a list of things that you're not going to do. What we don't come up with is a list of things that you will do or that you might do. So instead of asking yourself a negative focused question like how do I not make things worse for them than they already are? What if you asked yourself a different question? And this is what the idea of appreciative inquiry is all about. It's about asking the kinds of questions that look for excellence, things that are working, like what you actually really want instead of what you don't. And so the example that I'm going to give you is a kind of question like that, which is, and I guess my encouragement is to instead of asking yourself some of those like negative questions, ask yourself a question about what it is you really want. And I think one of the most important questions you could ask yourself is, how could I strengthen the relationship with this person as they navigate their loss? How could I strengthen my relationship with this person as they navigate their loss? Because when you think about a question like that, so it's open ended, right? So it can't be answered with yes or no. So it's going to stimulate some deeper thinking than a yes or no question. But it's also generative in the sense that it is focused on what you want rather than what you don't. And you want to strengthen the relationship with the grieving person, right? So the beautiful thing about asking yourself a question is that a question like that is it actually changes the future before you even have the answer. Because what it does is it redirects your energy and attention toward what you really want, right? And so let's say you ask yourself that question again. How could I strengthen the relationship with this person as they navigate their loss? You might not have like you might when you ask yourself that question, just think of it, maybe you have some ideas that come up right away, you know? I can tell you that one of the things that will not come up if you ask yourself that question, one of the answers that will not come up will be, I should never mention the person that they lost again, right? You're not gonna come up with an answer if you ask yourself a better question, like, "I'm never gonna mention the person they lost." So, on that note, if you ask yourself that question, you might have some ideas. Maybe you have some ideas that come up. Maybe you draw a blank. But it's a wonderful question to ask the grieving person. What if you told the grieving person that you care about? You said, like, I know how, like, I don't know exactly how hard this is, but I can imagine this must be absolutely brutal. And I would love to find a way, like, to show up for you in a ways that will actually strengthen our relationship because it's really important to me. And I would love to come up with ways that I could strengthen the relationship as you navigate this process. And so, I mean, I'd love to understand, like, do you have any, you can ask them if they have any ideas about that. You can ask them if you can keep just checking in with them. You can tell them, like, if something comes up that they want or need, that they can reach out to you. You can tell them, if you're doing something that they don't love, that they can just tell you and you'll stop doing it. But fundamentally, the point is that by asking yourself a generative question, it redirects your energy and attention, so it changes the future before you even have the answer because it changes your focus from what you don't want to what it is you do want. And when you change your energy and direction, like, it opens a whole different set of possibilities than if you stay stuck on asking the question, "How do I not make this worse for them than it already is?" So everybody will have different needs when it comes to, like, what you could do to strengthen the relationship with them as they navigate their loss. Everybody's gonna have different needs. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing to talk to them about, just to reaffirm your commitment to wanting to that outcome. Is like, I don't know what this is gonna look like, but it's really important to me that, our relationship is even stronger as you navigate this. And, like, I'm committed to trying to learn how to show up that way and maybe learn that with you. That's it. So the moral of the story is the the quality of the questions you ask determines the quality of your life. So we move in the direction of the things that we most persistently ask about, okay, or inquire about. So if you are consistently supporting a grieving person and you're just consistently asking yourself that question, how can I strengthen the relationship with them as they navigate this loss? You are going to show up in a different way. You are going to come up with better answers than you did if you had asked yourself, more negative questions. So that's it. And again, if you want to learn more about um, leadership inquiry, I mean, there's lots of resources online, but I would really encourage you to read about it. Because me, it's been just a profoundly life changing um, philosophy to adopt as kind of like my personal operating system. So that's it. If you've lost someone you love deeply, I wish you only peace and healing.